point, you almost wish he could have shapeshifted last year when they were playing the Bucks in the playoffs. If only his shoe was one size smaller, they could have won the championship. Welcome back to the Substantiate Podcast. I'm William Glasser, and this week I have a special guest on, Nate Spurlin, and today we're going to be talking about NBA players, but with superpowers. So the kind of thing like, this player is really good, basic example, this player's a really good shooter, so he's going to have a sharp shooting ability so that every shot goes in. So kind of taking things to the extreme. This player's really big and strong, so their superpower is going to be super strength. So now they're super strong compared to all the other players. So it's really just drawing out the extremes in each player's abilities, which kind of makes it interesting to compare. And then we also talk into some other kinds of superpowers like invisibility or mind reading, and you'll see how that comes up. But it's an interesting conversation. So we'll get into that in just a minute. But first, I am recording this intro on March 11th. And, well, when you look at that, we have an MLB season of 162 games coming up. Very exciting. By the time this is released, opening day will only be 2 weeks away. I think opening day is scheduled to be April 7th, which is a Thursday, I believe. So that will be fun. Obviously, big sports news, kind of interesting stuff there. So I'll, not going to talk too much about it, but a few different rule changes coming. Universal DH, no more 7-inning doubleheaders. Now they're back to 9 innings. They're getting rid of the ghost runner on second base. 12-team playoff, I believe it is. At one point it was rumored to be 14, but 14's a lot. I like 12 a lot better. And an interesting thing about them expanding the playoffs is, realistically, yeah, they're getting another $85 million a year from ESPN to have this additional round. So I get that, and ultimately that'll be better for the game of baseball. However, when you look at in the past, right, obviously for decades and decades, it was just the World Series. And then they added in the ALCS and NLCS. And then eventually they brought in one wild card team into the ALDS and NLDS. And then they added the wild card game to draw in another team in another game. And the only thing is that in each of those cases, except for when they brought in the wild card game, in all of those cases, they expanded the playoffs because the league was expanding. In this case, now we're going from 5 teams in each league to 6 teams in each league and changing the whole structure of it so that rather than having a round of 4 teams with the 4th team being decided by a wild card game, now we have first the round of the 3 through 6 seeds, similar to the way the NFL was before last year. So then the winners of those games, they go and play the 1 and 2. So they're kind of adding the wild card round a lot like the NFL had it before they added in the 7th playoff team in each conference. So the best way to think about it is it's just like the NFL was. So realistically, it's not a huge change. Again, incentivizes one more team to get in there, but ultimately, the real only problem I have is them expanding this without bringing in any expansion teams. Because, well, what's going to happen if they bring a new team to Montreal or Nashville or Vegas? Because Montreal and Nashville seem to be the leading two cities for an expansion team, followed most likely by Vegas, just because now there's an NFL and NHL franchise there, and they seem to be working out okay. So, if they expand to one more team in each league, they're probably going to want to now bring it up to the 14-team playoffs, right? So there isn't really a great balance at this point, and I'm just a bit worried that they might lose a bit of the integrity of the playoffs. Not right now, but if they do continue to expand and bring in 2 new expansion teams and ultimately continue expanding the playoffs. Anyway, last thing here before we get into my talk with Nate. SeatGeek is the best way that you can go and buy tickets to a concert, to a sporting event, anything at, a big stadium venue where you're going to need tickets. Go over to SeatGeek.com. And basically the way SeatGeek works is obviously they show you the map of the stadium, and then they'll show dots to show how good of an offer you're getting. How good is the value of the seats that they're trying to sell to you. So if you're getting front row seats for $10, that's going to be the biggest dark green dot there is. But if they're selling you the last row in the upper deck for $500, it's going to be a tiny red dot to show you this is not a good deal. And, it's a spectrum. So there's yellow, there's lighter green, so you can figure it all out. And over on SeatGeek.com, when you check out using promo code SubstantiatePod with your first purchase, you will save yourself $20 off your order. Here is Nate. Today, I'm joined by Nate Spurlin. How are you today, Nate?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me, William.
It's great to have you. So you host your own podcast. Do you want to take a minute to tell the listeners about that and why they should hear your NBA opinions?
Yeah, well, my podcast isn't based around NBA, although we do go into tangents sometimes. I actually have 2 podcasts. The first one is the It's All Opinion podcast, where me and one of my friends or me or someone else, we come on and we just talk about whatever is under the sun. And most of the time we do talk about basketball or football or whatever sport's going on during that time span. But my other podcast, The Cap, is a podcast that's built around talking about the latest music releases in hip hop. So if, for example, let's say Drake is dropping and we'll talk about Drake for that week and so on and so forth. So yeah, 2 podcasts. It's All Opinion and The Cap. Follow Old Milk on Instagram and Twitter at Old Milk Media.
Nice. So what is your favorite NBA team or player? Who do you follow?
I love basketball, and I love it to the point where I don't like to feel pain as I'm watching it. So because of that, I have multiple basketball teams that I watch. Obviously, I'm in the New York City area, so obviously I watch the Nets a lot, watch the Knicks a lot. Outside of the New York City area, well, James Harden is one of my favorite players, so now I'm fully on the Sixers bandwagon. The Bulls have always been a team that I enjoyed. And out west, I love watching Nikola Jokic play. I think that he's someone that is one of the best passers that we've ever seen, and he's deserving of every award that he gets.
Nice. I lived in New Jersey for a while, right next to New York City, so definitely have also seen a bit of the Knicks and Nets, but just because they were so bad when I was getting into basketball, I eventually just gravitated towards LeBron, so I followed him around from primarily the Cavs the second time, and then now to LA. New York basketball, a bit hard to commit to one thing. Yeah,
it's a pain for sure. It's amazing how the Knicks have arguably the best arena, arguably the best history in the NBA, and they still can't get anything right and consistently be a contender. It's honestly amazing in the worst way possible. It's amazing.
Yeah, my older brother's a huge Knicks fan, and he lived in Manhattan for a while, and now he lives in Dallas. And he would go to a bunch of Knicks games, and that was still while they were horrible. Like when he was in high school, he always says that he can count the amount of Knicks wins that he's seen on one hand, and not for lack of trying.
One thing I will say, which is probably the most interesting Knick game I've been to. I don't know if you ever heard of, he used to play in NBA, but he doesn't play anymore. Jarrett Jack.
No.
He was a journeyman for about 10 or 15 years. I'm not really sure. But the one time in his career that he got a triple double, I was there and I saw it. And that was like the most random thing that ever happened to me. So yeah, that's Knicks basketball for you. You never know what you're going to get when you watch them play.
Well, there it is. So anyway, today we're talking about the NBA All-Stars, primarily the starters. And what if they had superpowers and playing this game? So what we're going to do, we're going to go one by one through the 10 starters from the East and the West. We're going to sort of extrapolate from the players' skill sets and say, would this player fly? Would this player be invisible? Could this player read the mind of his opponent? All that kind of thing. So first, because this is the All-Stars, NBA All-Star Weekend, highly controversial. What were your thoughts? Did you like it, not like it, in all the skills competitions?
The skills competition last year was way better than it was this year. This year, I thought that the NBA has infatuation with making things more difficult than they need to be. I think that was definitely shown throughout the skills competition. I think another thing that was shown that was shown through was the All-Star game, where you have 3 quarters and you're playing to win each quarter, and in the last quarter all of a sudden you play for 24 points. Like, I understand the reason why they did that. That's to honor Kobe Bryant. Like last year, that's fine, but as a consistent format for me to want to sit down on a February Sunday and watch that, it doesn't work that well. The dunk contest, there's only a few dunks that you can do, but at the same time, I don't really care about like Obi Toppin is definitely one of the highlights of the dunk contest. He's one of the best dunkers in the league. But Jalen Green, I don't really care about seeing him in the dunk contest. I'd much rather it be Ja Morant. Obviously, because of his health issues, Zion Williamson couldn't be there because he hasn't played all season. So honestly, the highlight of All-Star Weekend is probably the 3-point contest, and even that can only go so far. Although it was amazing to see Karl-Anthony Towns win it, because he's been falsely claiming that he's the best shooting big man of all time, which isn't true. That's Dirk.
Yeah, I totally agree. So we'll start here with the Eastern Conference starters. So Team Durant, but all the starters are from the East because they even make the team selection a bit weird. But we'll start with Kevin Durant, with the captain. And so what kinds of highlights of his game, when you think of Kevin Durant, what is the 1 or 2 skills and abilities that pop out to you?
I think this might be interesting to say, but I think I'd characterize one of Kevin Durant's superpowers is as a shapeshifter, because he's 7 feet tall, but he's a guard basically. Yeah. He dribbles like a guard. The ball does not get ripped from him at all. He gets to his spot, he pulls up, knocks it down like a guard. He can do it if he needs to, but especially at his age and with the injury concerns now, you don't want him doing this, like being in the paint and stuff like that. You'd rather him avoid contact as much as possible, like a guard. So I definitely say a shapeshifter for Kevin Durant for sure.
I totally see that too. And I mean, you almost wish he could have shapeshifted last year when they were playing the Bucks in the playoffs. If only his shoe was one size smaller, they could have won the championship. Definitely, when you look at him, he's kind of like a lanky, skinny 7-footer. Like, most 7-footers in the league are either power forwards or centers, but they're big physical forces. And not that Kevin Durant isn't physical, but I definitely see that he's someone that can be flexible and play to what his team needs in that sense. So I like shape shifter there. So now moving on to the second player on the East is going to be Giannis. And Giannis is a similar height, a similar weight, but he definitely seems a bit bigger than Durant in that sense. What about Giannis? What are you thinking for him?
Giannis's whole game is predicated upon his strength. So I definitely think his superpower is super strength. At times, I think that they should call more charging fouls on him because really what he does is run into defenders and get that contact and score on them. And on defense as well, it's pretty hard to score on him as well because of his strength. Definitely strength for Giannis for sure. He's also one of the most dominant players physically that we've seen in a while, since only other player that I could say right now that is probably on the same level of dominance as him physically would probably be Joel Embiid. And in recent 20, 30 years, I'd say the past 20, 30 years, I'd say that both of them are comparable to Shaq, who is the most dominant basketball player of all time.
Yeah, I mean, Shaq is in his own category and everything. I mean, you can use him in 2K, and I just love playing as like the 0001 Lakers, and you go in between Kobe and Shaq, and Shaq is just such a force. So Giannis, he was even in Madden. He's so strong that they think that he could hold up to some extent in the NFL, or at least in a video game. But, someone that's fast and physical and definitely super strength there. He's probably, when you just look out there, he probably is the strongest player out on the court, coming in at 6'11", 242, according to Basketball Reference, while Kevin Durant is 6'10", 240. So surprisingly similar there.
Kevin Durant is 7 feet. He's admitted that he's lied about that. Actually, he's 7 feet. He's fully 7 feet, but he lies because he doesn't want to play 5, I guess, or be relied on to be in the paint like that. I think that honestly, when you look at how the Bucks are constructed, they've constructed the team really, really well around Giannis. It's essentially Giannis inside and everybody else shoots. And when you have someone like a Giannis or a LeBron or even a Russell Westbrook, whose game is predicated around being in the paint, and if I can't make this layup, I have to pass it out to a shooter, and they need to make that shot. It's very important that you surround shooters with them, obviously. Same thing with Joel Embiid as well. So that means that even to a lesser extent, James Harden, who really, really cares about spacing on the floor. So when you look at that and you have Grayson Allen, terrific shooter, dirty player, and then you also have Brook Lopez, who hasn't played yet this season, but he's also a very good shooter. Bobby Portis can shoot it from deep. Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton. I'm probably missing people. I think they have this new guy named Nora, who, from what I've seen so far, knocks it down really, really well from range as well. So that being said, it allows Giannis to get easy buckets, and if he's double teamed, the defense will pay. And that's a very, very important part about playing offense. How can I make the defense pay whenever they scheme things up? And
yeah, that's a good point.
The Bucks, they've done that very well.
Yeah. All right, so now coming over to another player that you've already mentioned, another physical force like those two, Joel Embiid. I
mean, I have to piggyback off of what I said about Giannis. He's super strength. There's probably no one in the league who can guard Joel Embiid successfully. The only person who can stop Joel Embiid is Joel Embiid himself. And for that reason, he's, in my opinion, a lock for a top three MVP candidate, along with Nikola Jokic and DeMar DeRozan, in my opinion. But what he's done with Philly is incredible. The fact that Ben Simmons hasn't played all season, and there's still Tobias Harris is kind of wishy-washy. He's not the most consistent, and there's still a consistent force in the East. And you can tell that if they got that extra guard and they still had the shooting around the team, that they would be a championship contender. They have the extra guard now, James Harden, and they still have, I know they got rid of Seth Curry. I'm forgetting, they have Danny Green around. They have Tyrese Maxey. They have Shake Milton. They still have players who are capable of shooting from three, George Niang as well. So that being said, I think that watch out for the Sixers.
Yeah, we're recording this towards the end of February here, so by the time this is released, the James Harden experiment in Philly will be a little further underway. But in his first game last night,
27 and 10.
Yeah, he dropped a double-double, had 20-something points, 12 rebounds, 8 assists, something like that. He's just a force to be reckoned with, and by the time the playoffs roll around, we'll see how he is mentally, but we know Joel Embiid will be there, And if there's one thing that could benefit Harden, it's probably someone that is consistent, and you're really getting that in Embiid. All right, so now coming off of the big men and down to the guards, we have Trae Young here and DeMar DeRozan. So starting with Trae Young, how is he going to fit into this super strength team?
I think that Trae Young is definitely, he has some of the most impressive range in the NBA. He has like NBA logo range. So for that reason, I'd say that he might be more of I think that the superpower would be aim. How that's used, I guess, is probably for the sake of the MCU. I'd say a Hawkeye type character, still very effective, but doesn't really have to do much dirty work. Just sits back and launches those bow and arrows, and they hit every time.
Yeah, Trae Young. I mean, back to New York basketball against the Knicks last year in the playoffs. I mean, like he was just crazy. He had the ice in the veins, and because of the ice in the veins, I almost want to say we should give him also like Mr. Freeze from like the Disney Incredible movies, or I think it was Disney, but like, he's just so ice cold there that so we could say AIM / Mr. Freeze, because that was quite crazy.
It was a playoff performance.
How he shut up the city.
Oh, yeah. They're still talking to this day, actually. I remember, I think I saw a video about this week of some artist was performing in the city, and there were still people saying F Trae Young, like in the performance in Madison Square Garden, where Trae Young had nothing to do with it at all, but people still feel a type of venom towards Trae Young. And the fact that he's playing into it as well is what makes the NBA great. We need villains sometimes. We need a good villain.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I bet if you ask people in Atlanta, he's definitely a hero. All right, so now DeMar DeRozan, arguably the most underrated offseason signing. Well, no longer overrated or underrated, but right now he's carried the Bulls. They're the number one team in the East right now. And how much of the Bulls being up where they are now is because of DeRozan versus, say, Lonzo Ball or the Alex Caruso signing, or, Zach LaVine already being around?
I think you have to put a lot of it on DeMar DeRozan, especially because of Lonzo has been out for most of the season. But when he has played, he has been really impressive. Same thing for Caruso as well. Caruso, I don't know why the Lakers let him go, but I'm glad they did, because the Bulls are a legitimate championship threat this year, I think. I think that the one issue that the team had was size, because you only have Vucevic, and he's not really known for being a big man that does dirty work. So signing Tristan Thompson really helps a lot. Aside from that, Kobe White can shoot from three. Lonzo is a really, 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 really good shooter now. And coming into the league about 4 or 5 years ago, or whenever he came into the league, I think that if I told a scout at that time that Lonzo would be one of the best 3-point shooters in the league, they'd laugh me out the building. But that's reality right now. Caruso, just the energy that he brings to the team is really valuable. Obviously, Zach LaVine's all-star. Vucevic is borderline an all-star. But one person who may go unnoticed is the second-round draft pick, Ayo Dosunmu. Yeah, Ayo Dosunmu. He starts at point guard for some of their games, and at times he's gotten double-doubles. The first game back from All-Star break, they played the Atlanta Hawks, and he was the primary defender on Trae Young. Trae Young went 3 for 17. I think he only had like 14 points and 10 assists, which is impressive for a rookie to do that on one of the best scorers, one of the best offensive players in the league, period. So I think that with the youth that they have, and also because DeMar is a veteran, Vooch is a veteran, and just having all that together, I think that that's a very dangerous team as well.
Yeah, Alex Caruso is, you mentioned how did the Lakers let him go, and especially for not that high of a price, it's definitely been hurting the Lakers. And Alex Caruso is one of my favorite players in the NBA because, like, when I play basketball, I'm not the greatest shooter, I'm not the greatest player on offense, but I always give it my all on defense. And so I sort of see that in Alex Caruso. And he's definitely come a long way since he was a rookie offensively. But his primary value is as a defender. And I ordered one of the Caruso goat shirts that he sells. It like says Caruso across the chest with a little goat in the middle. That's supposed to come soon. But yeah, so DeMar DeRozan, what kind of superpower are you looking at for him?
This is something that I've thought about a lot, and because I imagine that we're going to talk about Chris Paul too, and the thing that unites them, the one common trait in their game, is how they get to their spot and they make their shot. They're both mid-range, superior mid-range players. Some will argue that they brought the importance of the mid-range back. And for that reason, I'd probably say that I'd give DeMar DeRozan invisibility, because of the fact that you know that he's going to get to the mid-range, and you know not to allow him to get there in the first place, but he just dribbles and he just lulls the defender to sleep, and somehow, some way he gets to his spot, and you're like, I was not supposed to allow this to happen, and he knocks down the shot. So I definitely say invisibility for DeMar DeRozan.
Yeah, that's a good one, because that one is definitely a bit different than, just Giannis or Embiid having super strength. This is one where it's like, oh, okay, so now that he has that now, what does that look like on defense? Like, is he just sitting in the paint the whole time, invisible, and, all of a sudden, Nikola Jokic is going for a dunk? Well, actually, DeMar DeRozan was there, and although he might not have the matchup, if Jokic doesn't know he's there, he could just pop in. All right, so now moving on to the Western Conference. This was Team LeBron, who is now 5-0 in All-Star games. Just goes to the whole LeBron as a GM thing, although despite him recently coming out against those statements and saying that he lets the front office push all the buttons with the Lakers, but yet Rob Pelinka, the Lakers general manager, said that both he and AD signed off on them not making any moves at the trade deadline. So definitely showing he can be the GM, though. But
what a mess in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
What a mess.
Just from the peak in 2020 down to last year. And then at this point, when LeBron joined the team in, what was that, 2018, 2019? Mm-hmm. And since then, he's the only player that's been there that long. There is no continuity on the team. It's crazy. Before we get back to the rest of this episode, I want one moment to tell you about Built Bar. They are the best protein bar there is. They've got all kinds of flavors. I like a lot of the Puffs bars, which are literally protein-infused marshmallow. So there's churro puffs, there's coconut marshmallow puffs, there's banana cream pie puffs, lemon dip cheesecake, ruby chocolate, all with the marshmallow there, as well as the standard flavors. You got your double chocolate, mint brownie, coconut, salted caramel, coconut almond, and caramel almond delight. So you can go get all of that over on Built.com. They've got tons of limited time flavors that always come in and out. And when you check out at Built.com, use code SUBSTANTIATE to save yourself 10% off on your final purchase. Again, that's Built.com, and use code SUBSTANTIATE for 10% off. So starting it off with LeBron, what would you say his superpower is there?
I'd have to give him two. I'd have to say that he has super intelligence. He's one of the smartest basketball players ever. And then I'd have to say super strength, because he's also one of the strongest basketball players we've ever seen. I can also say that super speed, because he's just one of the most athletically gifted athletes we've ever seen. So any one of those three that I threw out would be probably, you could make an argument for being the most applicable to him, but I just threw out three. So
yeah, no, so you could definitely say a kind of like superposition of the three, of like, a bit of super intelligence here, a bit of super speed, a bit of super strength to keep him going after all of these years, and still to be named the all-star captain in year 18. So Yeah, I think definitely, he's by far the oldest player up here. The next oldest might be Durant, maybe DeRozan, but,
Yeah, it could be DeRozan.
yeah, yeah. But DeMar DeRozan certainly is past his prime either way. He's sort of coming into a second prime, but
Yeah, I was about to say it might be MVP this year.
yeah,
Especially if he keeps putting up numbers with Wilt and Michael Jordan. I don't know how
yeah.
you debate against it.
Yeah, I mean, there's that, but I mean, at the same time, from back when he was in Toronto and then San Antonio, and, it did get to the point where this off season, it was like, well, DeMar DeRozan's out there. Should we get him? Well, we'll see. What's it looking like? And the Bulls pulled the trigger, and boy, is that paid off. But yeah, so definitely still a good player up there. Obviously, he's an all-star starter. LeBron James with sort of a bunch of different combo of skills there. So now, your favorite player in the West, Nikola Jokic, the reigning MVP. What are you thinking for him?
Definitely super intelligence. He's also one of the smartest basketball players that we've ever seen. And it's shown by how great of a passer he is. It's very rare that he has an inefficient game. He is efficiency distilled. The fact that he has put Denver on his back without Jamal Murray, for the most part without Michael Porter Jr., and they're still comfortably outside of the play-in spot is impressive. And that's the biggest argument for him being a back-to-back MVP.
Yeah, I mean, when Jamal Murray went down last year, I know I was thinking like, oh, okay, now won't really have to worry about the Nuggets in the playoffs, and that was not the case. Jokic, kept that team alive, kept them right where they had left off, and now last year they traded for Aaron Gordon from Orlando, and things are starting to come together over in Denver. So super intelligence. I mean, to be the MVP, you have to have a lot of different qualities, and that one definitely stands out where, I guess he's more similar to Embiid than Giannis just in terms of physical size, but I mean, he definitely has the physical prowess to him also.
It's amazing how someone who can barely jump can get 20 rebounds. That's really amazing to me.
Yeah, I mean, just the ability to box out, like, he could box out probably almost anyone. And, obviously when you're in the NBA playing against a bunch, the biggest, strongest guys pretty much in the world, to be number one there and win the MVP and lead his team like he has definitely says a lot about him. And other than that one incident with the Morris brothers towards the beginning of the season, he's another sort of like Embiid, pretty stable player there.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I will say about Jokic is that he gets hit a lot. I remember 2 years ago, before he really got that respect as a top 5 player from referees, you could watch him play and he'll still have all the passes, all the highlights. And when they zoom in on him, because you don't really realize how much of a beating some players take till they zoom in on you. His arms would be like red, like as red as Rudolph's nose, like crazy red. So like, I mean, in that situation, personally, in my opinion, Jokic isn't in the wrong for that Morris thing, because Morris threw an elbow, and if you're gonna be dirty, then you shouldn't. If you're gonna do something dirty, then the one thing you shouldn't do is turn your back from the person who you just did something dirty to. So I don't really have much sympathy for Morris in that situation. I think that Jokic was just trying to defend himself.
Yeah, and coming from the Morris brothers, I would also not want to mess with the Jokic brothers.
Yeah.
That was quite the week of NBA news there, between all the tweets or whatever from the Jokic brothers, like brand new account. But so now moving on to the next one. This is a bit of a surprise all-star, not based off of his performance this year, but
Andrew Wiggins.
Yeah, Andrew Wiggins,
I honestly forgot.
He's the one that kind of stands out as a starter there, but I mean, well deserved, definitely. And, he's followed by Stephen Curry being the only team to have 2 All-Star starters this year. So let's start with Curry and then sort of work back to Andrew Wiggins, because Stephen Curry is definitely, he's the number one on that team. So with Stephen Curry there, I mean, obviously we talked about Trae Young and having that sharpshooting ability, that aim. What are you thinking for Curry?
It has to be the same as Trae Young. It has to be the aim, the sharpshooting, to compare it to the MCU again, the Hawkeye. It has to be. He's one of the best shooters we've ever seen. Let me not say that because people get better every day, but like the fact that Steph Curry is Steph Curry and his ability to change the game with his off-ball movement, because people are so scared of him even attempting a 3 in the first place. it has to be the aim. It has to.
And not just that, but like his ability to control his body. Like, everyone thinks of him in shooting threes, but he can be magical around the rim just the same. Maybe not quite flashy dunks, but he'll get around reverses and stuff, and he'll get the ball in the hoop from
really
up
good
close
flutter package too.
Yeah. So I mean, he's just got that. Like, I almost feel like his core muscles are just like insane because of just all of the things, and like when you watch an NBA player, even college players, and probably good high school players too, when they shoot, it's like they jump and they just release the ball at the top of their jump, and it's like they're floating for a second, as opposed to like kids at my skill level and many other adults and players, and where it looks like, you're really using your legs for that power. So when you're Stephen Curry and you're driving towards the basket and you're in the air for, I don't know, like half a second, something like that, but just all of the things that you can do in that half second and manipulate your body to get it to the point where, okay, now I'm facing this direction over here with my feet over there, and the ball is about to go in the rim. But sharpshooting, and I guess maybe not shape-shifting like Durant in that sense, but just some kind of like flexibility there, I think would be a good addition.
Potentially invisibility too, because you know what spot he's trying to get to, and he still gets there no matter what.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, it just doesn't even matter, like, where he's shooting from. Like, to go along with the flexibility, like, if you're thinking about from the Batman's, like, Mr. Plastic or whatever, or where, just extending the arms and from halfway across the court, just dropping the ball in the hoop seems like a Curry thing there, too.
It would still count as a 3-pointer, too.
So now, working backwards back to Andrew Wiggins and that Golden State Warriors offense, what kind of a role has he come into this year that's taken him all the way up to All-Star starter?
If I'm being honest, the All-Star starting position for Andrew Wiggins shocked me a lot. He's become a really good defender. And there are multiple points I can go with this. I think the first one that I'm going to start with is more straightforward. The fact that the Warriors aren't built around a single player. They are a system. They are a team. So, and you're seeing it right now with Draymond Green being out, how much harder it is for them to win games. Because if you take one of those players off, it's like, we're better as a whole. What do we really do? Do we have the replacement for that player? In my humble opinion, I think that Draymond Green is one of the most irreplaceable players in the league because of the skill set that he brings to the game and the intelligence that he brings to the game. And that's what we're seeing right now. But that being said, I think that the culture of the Golden State Warriors, the fact that they go for it every year and their expectation is to be in the finals and win the finals every year, and the fact that they have guys, Clay, Steph, Dre, who have done that before multiple times, and they know how to get the best out of their teammates and how to coach them up and stuff like that. I think that Andrew Wiggins is just another example of that. When you look at players like Jordan Poole as well, Gary Payton II, Juan Toscano Anderson, these are players that, at least Gary Payton II and Juan Toscano Anderson, these are players that we probably should have never heard of. but they're making legitimate contributions on an NBA championship roster. And that all goes back to the system that Golden State has. Additionally, for Andrew Wiggins, I think that the one thing about him in Minnesota versus in Golden State is that in Golden State, there are certain players that are able to be the number one guy. And it's clear that Andrew Wiggins isn't. That's fine because he's thriving as a number 3 or a number 4. And it's all about role. And when you find that right role, how good are you in that role? And it's clear that Andrew Wiggins is one of the best players in the league at that role. So for that reason, I guess that's why they gave him the All-Star starter nod. I don't know though. It's an interesting thing that happened. It's similar to, it's like if I remember a few years ago when Zaza Pachulia almost got an All-Star starter All-Star starter in the All-Star game just because everyone was voting him in because he's on the Golden State Warriors. And I believe he's from a country named Georgia, if I'm not mistaken, but everyone out there were voting him in as well. It's basically the successful Zaza Pachulia, except Andrew Wiggins is actually a legitimate top 75 player.
Do you think mind reading would be a good one for him, just considering the defense and his ability to communicate within that system you're talking about in Golden State?
Yeah, I think so. I think also, I think so. I think that I can also say a bit of intelligence from the standpoint of understanding what needs to be done and being able to execute it correctly. I can also say a little bit of shape shifting for the same reason, understanding what the team needs and being able to fill that role successfully. So any one of those three, I don't think that it can be all three because I think that you have it's the same argument for all three and you can only really pick one. But yeah, those are the three I'd probably say for Andrew Wiggins.
All right, so let's go with mind reading here just for the sake of variety in these different abilities here. So before we get into our last one, which is Ja Morant, we have Kevin Durant, shape-shifting, Giannis and Joel Embiid, super strength, then Trae Young, who has sharpshooting abilities, as well as sort of Mr. Freeze-like abilities from The Incredibles, just spewing out ice from his veins, and DeMar DeRozan with invisibility. And then on Team LeBron, it has super intelligence, super speed, and super strength, a bit of all of them. Nikola Jokic has super intelligence, just floor vision and everything that starts from there off to passing and seeing open lanes and knowing what to do next. Then Steph Curry, sharpshooting and a bit of flexibility, sort of similar to the shape-shifting we were talking about, a flexible player. And Andrew Wiggins with the mind reading. Also, I don't think it's a coincidence that both of the Golden State players there have that sort of flexible aspect to their game where they can adapt to the situation. So, again, coming back to our last All-Star starter here, Ja Morant. Ja Morant has really come on over the last 2 years, come onto the scene, and I think this was his first All-Star nomination. So, what powers does he exemplify for you?
It has to be jumping ability. It has to be. The fact that Ja Morant can probably have a compilation of highlights where he misses dunks and they're still incredible. I can't think of another player that has that. I genuinely can't. Like, he almost dunked over Kevin Love. Would have been crazy. He's also had some amazing dunks too that he's actually put in the hole. Don't get me wrong. Like, he dunked over Aaron Baines a few years back and that was crazy. But just the leaping ability, the fact that he has, I think also, I don't know if this really counts as a superpower, but the fearlessness to, no matter what, I'm going to try to dunk on you and I don't care who you are. I think that that's something that is very rarely seen. I think that's something that, especially amongst guards, is even more of a asset because the only two guards I can really think of with the same kind of thought process are Russell Westbrook and before the injuries, Derrick Rose. But aside from that, I think that it definitely has to be the jumping ability for sure. It just has to be. Also a top 5 MVP candidate, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, when you're looking at those last two there, Wiggins and Morant, like, I think that one of them has to win most improved player because, whether it's Wiggins just completely coming onto the scene this year or Ja Morant, who started to come up there last year and just absolutely pulling away this year and making it so that you actually want to watch the Memphis Grizzlies play basketball. It's just amazing what those two players have done. And Morant, like you were saying, yeah, he's a big guard. Sort of like, I mean, Durant is technically a forward, but, still that sort of same sense of, hey, I'm big, I'm a bit lanky, and I'm just going to destroy you. I'm just going to go over the top of you. And coming back to that whole dunk contest idea, you just slot a defender in there, and I would put money on Morant to win that.
I would too. He does not care. The fact that when he first, I believe this was his rookie season, and Andre Iguodala was supposed to be on the team, but Iguodala didn't want to be on the team because they weren't a contender at the time. And Ja Morant was like, okay, we don't need you. Like publicly saying, if you don't want to be here, go, leave. And just that dog, that mentality of, I'm going to get this done. We're going to win a game. I'm going to do whatever I want to do is so important especially to a point guard. So important.
Yeah. So we have Ja Morant with the jumping ability and maybe flying, you could say, because that would sort of go hand in hand there.
I'd watch him try to dunk from the free throw line, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, just makes the game three-dimensional when you factor in height into it. And, between Curry and Morant there with, Curry's ability, he could, some sort of flexibility. If he could get the ball to Morant from everywhere, then, when we're looking at the West versus East here, we have the West seems a bit more with the super intelligence, a bit more with the speed, a bit more with the physical, locomotive powers of flying and flexibility like that, while the East has, the shape-shifting Durant and then Giannis and Embiid with super strength, and which are more just straight up physical things, and then Trae Young and DeRozan with Mr. Freeze and invisibility. You may have noticed by now, but March Madness is going on. Tons of college basketball games almost every day, and if you want to go root on your favorite team, go over to fanatics.com and get yourself maybe a t-shirt or sweatshirt or a hat for your favorite team. They have everything from NCAA merch to NFL merch, MLB, NBA, NHL, even MLS and NASCAR. They've got everything you could possibly want there. So go over to fanatics.com, and by using the link in the show notes to go over there, your purchase will get tracked back to the podcast and help us out. So again, go over to fanatics.com, the link in the show notes, to get sports gear for everything from college to NFL, MLB, NBA, NHL, and even NASCAR and MLS. When we're looking at these different abilities matching up against each other, which of them do you think really stand out and would make the biggest impacts in the game?
That's a good question. So we have Ja versus Trae. We have jumping versus the sharpshooting. I'd say the sharpshooting because 3 is worth more than 2. Mm-hmm. Then we'll have DeRozan and Steph Curry. I'd give that to Steph Curry because, again, 3 is worth more than 2. Then you'll have LeBron versus Kevin Durant. I think it has to be LeBron. I think that he's the only one that we gave multiple superpowers to for the most part, or 3 superpowers at least. So it has to go to LeBron there. And then you'll have Wiggins versus Giannis. That's Giannis easily. And then lastly, you'll have Jokic versus Embiid. And that is a question I've been trying to figure out the answer to for the past 2 seasons. So I think that one's a toss up for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, when I look at this, I think of right, the invisibility there for DeMar DeRozan, and I'm looking at that, and like I was mentioning before, like on defense, that's just gonna be crazy. You have to like really be protective with your dribbles because of where he is, and there's only one invisible player there, so he can only be in one passing lane. But at the same time, he's in a passing lane, so you have to be calculated about those passes. And then on the other side of the ball, or on the other team on the West, with Andrew Wiggins' mind reading, again, something that can be useful on offense and defense, but just to know what your opponent is about to do. And the Morant jumping, to me, those 4 skills, or those 3 skills, are really popping out and can make a difference here.
No, for sure.
All right, so now with Trae Young here and having the aim and Mr. Freeze abilities because of, his performance last year in New York in the playoffs, and leaning into that character, like, how would you say that having this ability to just shoot ice, what do you think he could use that for?
I think that he can, honestly, I think that it just shows how unbothered he is when he shoots. It doesn't matter, like if LeBron's guarding him or John Morant's guarding him, John Morant, that we've given the ability to jump. Doesn't matter. Trae Young will just shoot the ball higher than John Morant can jump, and it will still go into the hoop. I think that that's very important for the East.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that is something that's going to be important for them, because when we talk about Giannis and how he needs to be surrounded by shooters, well, not that Durant can't shoot, not that DeMar DeRozan can't shoot, but in this sense, their powers might not necessarily lean directly into that. And then what about Kevin Durant? Where do you think the shape-shifting ability, is that on defense? He's going to get all big like Ant-Man, and then on offense just be something more useful than just being huge. But like, how do you see him using that power?
Honestly, I think possibly out of all the superpowers that we've given, that might be the most accurate, because it's Kevin Durant. What's the weakness in Kevin Durant's game? Can you point to one specific thing that Kevin Durant can't do?
Only against like a Giannis or a Embiid or a Jokic, someone that's just so powerful that could take on anyone.
Exactly. So like, I think that on defense, Kevin Durant is one of the best defenders in the league. He's declined. I mean, obviously, as you age, you decline in terms of defense, right, but he's still one of the best defenders in the league. He can rim protect if he needs to. Even on offense, he can, if Trae Young needs help shooting threes, Kevin Durant can come out and shoot the three. If you need another presence inside because Giannis wants to be on the perimeter or Joe Embiid wants to be in the perimeter, you can throw lobs to Kevin Durant. I think that just the fact that he's so versatile as an NBA player, I think that really increases the amount of things that the East can do.
Yeah, I agree. And so lastly, when it comes down to it with these different matchups, what would each team have to do to get the advantage? How would the East and the West have to play for each team to win?
I think it'd come down to pace. I think that if the East is able to play slower because they have two dominant players inside, I think that they'll have the advantage. However, for the West, because they have LeBron James with the super intelligence and they have Jokic with the super intelligence, they can play faster because they can already see 5 steps ahead. And they may be able to do things that, for DeMar DeRozan with his invisibility, they may be able to do things that DeRozan can't see yet, or DeRozan won't be in the right position yet. So potentially take DeRozan out of the game because of that pace that they play with. So I think it's all about pace for sure.
Yeah. And so then from that in that same way, you're saying that the West would need to speed things up. And, while Giannis and Embiid have their super strength, let's try to get up on offense or back on defense before, they're fully ready. I think that's a good point. So ultimately, with that there, who do you think would be able to control that more? Who are you going to take to win this matchup?
I'd probably say the West, because I think that the West will be able to play slow better than the East will be able to play fast.
Yeah, that makes sense. What version, or the worst version of yourself, who has the higher floor? And that definitely makes sense that the West would have the higher floor, where these are both star-studded teams. They both have very high ceilings, but that ability to play slower makes a lot of sense. So thanks for coming on, Nate, today. And where can the listeners find you and your podcasts?
They can find me personally on Instagram and Twitter at oldmilk00. They can find my podcast on Instagram and Twitter at oldmilkmedia. And all podcasts are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Amazon Music, basically wherever you get your podcasts, you can find my podcast as well. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, it was great having you, and can't wait to see what happens here towards the end of the NBA season. And do you have any big predictions for the rest of the year?
Be very, very worried about the Denver Nuggets if Jamal Murray's healthy. Be very, very worried.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. So thanks again, Nate.
Thank you for having me.
Hope everyone enjoyed that episode. A bit of a different kind of hypothetical matchup there. Again, sort of just taking the extremes of some players' abilities and what if they were superpowers. So go share that episode with a friend that you think might enjoy it. And we'll be back here in another 2 weeks. We've got another hypothetical matchup in honor of the start of baseball season, which I believe will be just a day or two before the season starts. So baseball's coming up. Basketball and hockey playoffs are coming up. NFL draft is coming up. It's a good month or two to be a sports fan right now. So again, stick around. Another 2 weeks, we'll be back here with another episode. Thank you for listening to this episode of Substantiate. The best way to help support the show is to, number one, tell your friends about Substantiate. That is the number one way to support us. The second way is to leave us a 5-star review in Apple Podcasts or Podchaser. Number 3, follow us at SubstantiatePod on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
Hello, I'm Anthony.
And I'm Dr. Issues.
And we're hosts of Capes on the Couch, the podcast where comics get counseling.
Superheroes don't always get to go home happy. That's where we come in.
We offer psychiatric and mental health analysis of comic book characters.
So check us out at capesonthecouch.live and across all social media platforms at Capes on the Couch.